When it comes to extreme sports games, you probably think of Activision's Tony Hawk series right away. I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 were two of the best sports games on the original PlayStation. They had great soundtracks and quite a bit to do. There were a few spin-offs that weren't bad, mainly taking the place of another insane athlete and porting a new game to their sport, like Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. None were really as good as THPS, although I really did enjoy Sean Palmer's Pro Snowboarder. Acclaim wanted to get on the extreme sports bandwagon, and before they created their infamous BMX XXX, there was Aggressive Inline, a semi-open world game that featured about 24 skaters, an RPG feel, a decent soundtrack, and a good selection of things to do. It does have a few shortcomings, but for a game that didn't start with Tony Hawk, it wasn't half bad. First things first. What the hell is with the opening credits scene? Why is there a fat bald guy getting angry at a computer and chucking it out the window? It has absolutely no relevance to the game at all, and it doesn't even really make sense. Yeah, it's funny, but this is something you don't expect to see in a rollerblading game. After that, you get to see some real footage of the skaters jamming hoobastangs crawling in the dark. This would have made a lot more sense just to stick the logo on here and call it a day, but nope, we get to instead see a pissed off Quidgibo. I can't believe I actually got to use Quidgibo in a review. For those who don't watch The Simpsons, according to Bart Simpson, a Quidgibo is a fat, dumb, balding North American ape, otherwise known as Homer. Anyway, back on topic. The main premise of Aggressive Inline is very similar to the games THPS created. You skate around on a stage looking for objectives to complete. Some are given to you right off the bat, and others must be obtained by interacting with some sort of NPC. This includes normal people, but also radios, walkie-talkies, audio speakers, and the such. Much of the game's dialogue is written to be on the goofy side, which is fine as it gives it a sense of humor, but much of it is pretty and feels too childish. That wouldn't normally be a problem, but for a game that includes Sublime's Wrong Way on the soundtrack, there's something just not right about that. The objectives themselves range from obtaining a certain score in a fixed amount of time to performing a specific trick over a particular area. Some of them require platforming skills that are harder than physically doing the challenge. For example, some challenges force you to climb up near maximum stage height just to do a quick trick on a very narrow platform, but it's challenging just to navigate up there because your skater has a tendency of banking off of walls and careening off the edge of the floor. Because of this, grinding edges seems to be the preferred method of travel, but if you're horrible at it, you'll just fall off anyway. It can be frustrating to say the least, especially when it takes half an hour to finally get up on the specified area and do a 5-second trick that was incredibly easy to perform. For the most part, all the skaters have the exact same trick selection as the others. This means that the only difference between each of the characters are the starting stats and their looks. The stats don't mean much though, because the game features an RPG style feel to it, which I'll get to shortly. But as for the tricks, no one even starts off with any special tricks. Instead, you need to find heads floating around in a hard to reach area. Collect this head and you'll unlock that skater's special trick. This needs to be done with each individual skater, as unlocked stats, tricks, and stages don't carry over. I guess this is good for someone that has multiple people playing on the same memory card, as each player can choose their own character and not have their status overridden, but if you're going for 100% completion, it's going to take some time. Let me go into the XP mechanics of the game. Each bleeder's stats start out pretty damn low. In order to improve this, you do tricks. Depending on the kind of trick you do, you'll net XP that will increment one of several categories. You have grinding, jumping, speed, spin, manuals, and a couple others. When you get enough XP in one category, it levels up. Naturally, this means that you'll be more proficient with that skill. So a higher grind level will let you grind a rail further and longer without falling off as easily. In order to really progress further in the game and do the later challenges, it's pretty much imperative that you do as many tricks on your own as possible. Otherwise, you'll be doing it later. Because there is some trick grinding involved, the game tends to get monotonous at one point. With the THPS games, you always had objectives to perform. Aggressive Inline instead gives you open world stages where you can do what you want and how you want. It's a good idea, don't get me wrong, but the stages themselves often have so much crap placed in them that they can feel a bit too cluttered. They can especially be difficult to navigate the more narrow areas, because if you hit a wall, you careen off of it. You do get pretty much free control over the camera, but this can be problematic as well. When in tight areas, the camera and at times even your skater can get glitchy, especially when face planting. For example, if you jump off of a wall, try to do a trick and fall, you may hit the ground and then have muscle spasms for a few seconds while the game tries to put you back on your feet. It also occasionally happens when trying to do a trick and hitting a small area. It's just odd and you think they could have smoothed it over a bit. Fortunately for new players, the controls are fairly easy to figure out, but you do get a tutorial stage that's fairly decent and quick and gives you the rundown on how the game works. If you pass it, there's no rewards other than seeing a 100% mark on the tutorial stage. But even if you do know how to play, you'll fall. A lot. And you do have something called a juice meter. Think of it as being similar to a special meter in the THPS games, although if you let it run out, you get a game over. That's right, there's no timers, so instead if you run out of juice, you just call it quits. If you have 100,000 points, you can opt to continue, but you don't get a lot of juice generated when you do so. So it's best to immediately find a ramp and start doing basic tricks to get a small little buffer. Every time you bail or just sit there doing nothing, the meter will drop. If it's getting dangerously low and you don't want to pull off any tricks, you can also decide to grab the juice boxes floating around on the stage. Again, it's required to find all of them to fully complete the stage, but the green ones will give you about half your juice meter, while the purple ones fill it. If you find an orange one, it'll extend your maximum juice capacity. In other words, think of the juice meter as your life bar. Besides the juice boxes and the floating disembodied heads that you see floating around, you'll also find keys laying around. In a nutshell, there's 7 stages, but each one is divided into 2 parts. One part is unlocked until you can find a hidden key laying around in the other stages for it. Some keys are fairly easy to find, but others aren't. It'll require you to jump stages every once in a while just to get the keys. Each stage also follows a theme, such as an air control center, museum, and my personal favorite, the carnival. However, being that there's only 7 levels, it can feel a bit minimal in the stage department. If you do manage to fully complete a stage, you'll unlock a hidden character, which, once again, starts from scratch and is no different other than looks. Plus, the hidden skaters are pretty lame looking. A pirate, a clown, a knight. Again, Acclaim is going for odd, but they just don't fit in. Finally, no extreme sports game are complete without a licensed soundtrack. This game only features about a dozen songs, but they include a few rap songs, but mainly bands such as POD, Saliva, and Real Big Fish. It'll keep you entertained for at least a little while, but you may not end up putting on your own CDs just because the soundtrack is limited. Aggressive Inline isn't a bad game, but it does tend to feel mundane after quite a while. A few more stages or a bit more of a difference between characters may have been a better option than to put in a few crappy extra skaters. Hell, they should have made the game smoother while they were at it. However, for a game that appears in the same time frame as games featuring Tony Hawk, it puts up a pretty good fight. If anything, it's a good weekend killer. Final score? 6 out of 10. This is Reaper. Happy Friday.